Daniel had never been afraid of his school. In fact, Lincoln High felt like a second home. He was a senior, a basketball player, and he'd spent countless late nights in the gym practicing shots under the dim lights. But that night, something about the silence felt different. It was close to 8 p.m. when he realized he'd left his jacket behind after practice. The rest of the team had gone, and even the janitor's cart was gone from the hallway. Normally, he'd shrug it off and grab it tomorrow, but the forecast called for freezing temperatures. Reluctantly, he decided to make the trip back inside. The hallways were empty, the glossy floors reflecting the pale overhead lights. The building itself seemed alive, humming with low electrical buzzes and faint creaks from the old pipes. Daniel shoved his hands in his pockets as he walked, his sneakers squeaking softly with every step. The further he went, the more aware he became of the sound, sharp, repetitive, echoing down the corridor. He stopped to listen. Silence. Then, faintly, another squeak. Not his. His pulse quickened. He turned around quickly, but the hallway stretched empty behind him. He told himself it was just the sound bouncing back. Old schools carried echoes in strange ways. Shaking off the chill running up his arms, he pushed open the heavy gym doors. The moment he stepped inside, the air changed. It was several degrees colder than the hallway, almost as if he'd walked into a refrigerator. The vast space swallowed him up, shadows stretching long across the polished floor. His jacket sat crumpled near the bleachers, waiting like a forgotten relic. He jogged toward it, wanting to get out quickly, but stopped dead when he noticed something strange. Across the floor, faintly glistening in the dim light, were wet footprints. Not sneakers, not shoes, bare feet. Small, like those of a child. Daniel frowned. There hadn't been any little kids around, and the gym floor was spotless after practice. He glanced toward the doors, wondering if maybe one of the janitor's kids had wandered in. But the prints didn't head out, they trailed across the floor and vanished into the locker room. He froze in place, jacket forgotten for a moment, every instinct telling him to leave it and run. But curiosity clawed at him. He took a slow step toward the locker room, then another. With each step, the air grew heavier, colder. His breath began to fog. When he pushed open the locker room door, a wave of damp air hit him. The smell of chlorine clung thick in the air, stinging his nose, though Lincoln High didn't even have a pool. Somewhere inside, the sound of water echoed, soft, steady, like showers running. Daniel's skin prickled. "Hello," he called, his voice sounding much smaller than he intended. No answer, only the steady hiss of water. The tiles beneath his shoes were slick, damp. He walked slowly, scanning the rows of lockers, the pale light above flickering as if it were about to die. At the far end of the room, steam curled upward from the showers, drifting into the air. The faucets were on full blast, pouring water onto the tiled floor. No one was there. Daniel's throat tightened as he stared at the fogged-up mirror on the wall. For a moment, it was blank, just smeared condensation. Then, as if an unseen finger pressed against the glass, words began to form, slowly dragging through the mist. "Get out." His breath caught in his chest. He stumbled back, his sneakers squealing against the tiles. The water still ran, but the message on the mirror grew darker, as if written harder, deeper. Panic surged through him. He turned and sprinted out of the locker room, nearly tripping over his own feet. As soon as he hit the gym floor again, the showers cut off. Silence fell like a heavy blanket, and then, footsteps, fast, bare, slapping against the floor, right behind him. Daniel didn't dare look back. He grabbed his jacket in a blur, sprinting for the doors. The pounding footsteps followed, chasing, always just a few steps behind. His heart slammed against his ribs, his lungs burning as he burst through the exit and into the icy night air. The moment his feet hit the pavement outside, the sound stopped. Daniel turned, chest heaving, expecting someone, anyone, to be there. But the gym doors were closed. Through the windows, The gym was dark and still. He told himself he'd imagined it, that his mind was playing tricks on him. But deep down, Daniel knew he had not been alone in that building. And the next morning, when he returned with his friends, he found the same wet footprints across the gym floor. This time, though, they led not just into the locker room, but right up to the bleachers where he had left his jacket. Sophia had always loved the old auditorium. Even though most students found it creepy with its peeling paint and shadowy corners, she thought it had character. The heavy red curtains, the scent of dust and old wood, the echo of footsteps on the stage, it all felt magical to her. Being part of the drama club meant she spent more time there than most, often staying late into the evening after everyone else had gone home. But there was something about being alone in that room that could unsettle even her. The auditorium had a history that students whispered about. Decades ago, during a school play, a stage light had come loose from the rigging above and crashed down mid-performance. The boy standing under it had no chance. He died instantly, right there in front of the cast and audience. Some claimed you could still hear the applause that had rung out before the accident, trapped in the walls, replaying itself on quiet nights. Teachers dismissed the stories as urban legends, but the drama club carried them like folklore. Sophia never believed in ghosts, not really, but the story always lingered at the back of her mind when the lights dimmed. That night, she had stayed after rehearsal to practice her lines. Everyone else had left, their laughter and chatter fading down the hallways, until she was alone. The massive auditorium stretched into darkness, rows of empty seats facing her. The stage lights above flickered softly, casting cones of yellow and white across the wooden boards. She read aloud, her voice carrying through the empty space. If love be madness, then let me be mad. Clap, clap, clap. Her words cut off, her breath caught in her throat. From somewhere in the back rows came the faint sound of applause. Slow, deliberate, her eyes darted toward the seats. All she saw was blackness. Shadows layered upon shadows. Hello, her voice cracked slightly. No answer. The silence stretched, and just as she began to convince herself it was her imagination, the sound came again. 3 sharp claps, louder this time. Her pulse quickened. She stepped back instinctively, her shoes scraping against the stage floor. The spotlight above flickered, then suddenly flared to life, bathing her in blinding white. The rest of the auditorium plunged into deeper shadow, making it impossible to see past the edge of the stage. Her breath echoed too loudly in her own ears. She could feel her palms dampen as she clutched the script in her hands. And then she saw it. A figure, center stage. It hadn't been there before. Its outline was faint, like smoke or shadow in the bright light, but it was unmistakably human. The figure bowed slowly, theatrically, as though acknowledging a crowd. Sophia froze. Her script slipped from her fingers, hitting the wooden boards with a hollow slap. The figure's head lifted. Its face, or lack of one, was wrong. Smooth where features should have been, except for a grin. A grotesque, unnatural grin stretched too wide across the faceless surface, like it had been carved into it. Her body moved before her brain could catch up. She bolted for the side exit, her footsteps pounding in rhythm with her hammering heart. She grabbed the heavy auditorium doors and yanked. They didn't move. She pulled again, harder this time, her shoulder slamming against the wood. Nothing. Behind her, a sound began. Clap, 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 slow at first, then faster, louder, multiplying. It was no longer just one person. It was hundreds. The entire auditorium was clapping, the sound roaring like a storm of hands in the dark. Sophia screamed and twisted the door handle again. This time, with a deafening bang, the doors flew open, slamming against the walls so hard that the frame cracked. She stumbled into the hallway, gasping for air. The clapping stopped instantly. She looked back. The doors stood still and silent, shut as if they had never opened. Her chest heaved as she pressed her back against the wall, tears streaming down her face. She didn't go back for her script. She didn't go back to turn off the spotlight. She didn't even go back the next day when drama club rehearsed. From that night on, Sophia refused to enter the auditorium again. And though she never told anyone exactly what she had seen, other students whispered that whenever the stage lights flickered, you could still hear faint clapping, coming from the shadows where no one sat. Every school had secrets, but Lincoln Middle's basement was the kind students only whispered about. Teachers rarely acknowledged it, and when they did, it was always with a warning, stay out of there. It's not safe. The door to the basement was always locked, tucked behind the boiler room at the far end of the east wing. Most students didn't even know it existed, but Liam, Josh, and Claire knew. And once they discovered it, curiosity consumed them. The trio were inseparable, drawn together by the shared love of dares and exploring places they weren't supposed to go. One afternoon, after class had ended, they spotted the janitor's key ring dangling from his cart. While he was busy mopping down the hall, Liam snatched the keys and stuffed them into his hoodie pocket. They laughed nervously the whole walk to the east wing, their sneakers squeaking against the worn linoleum floors. When they reached the basement door, they paused. The air back there felt different, stale and heavy, like the school itself was holding its breath. The metal door loomed, scratched and dented, with a faded sign above it that read authorized personnel only. Josh grinned and slid the key into the lock. Let's see what they're hiding. The door groaned as it opened, releasing a blast of cold, damp air. A staircase led down into the dark, swallowing the weak light from the hallway. The three exchanged uneasy looks, but none of them wanted to be the one to back out. They descended slowly, each step creaking under their weight. The deeper they went, the colder it became, until their breaths puffed out invisible clouds. At the bottom, Liam fumbled with his phone flashlight and swept the beam across the basement. What it revealed made them all pause. Rows of old desks stretched out in the shadows, arranged as if an entire classroom had been abandoned down there. Dust covered everything, thick enough to dull the carvings and scratches etched into the wood. The smell of damp earth clung to the air, mixed with something sharper, like rot. "This is so creepy," Claire whispered, hugging herself. Josh ran his hand across one of the desks, wiping away grime. "Look at this. People carved the names here." Sure enough, the desks were covered with initials, doodles, and dates, some from decades ago. Most were faded, but one name on the nearest desk stood out clear and fresh, as if it had been carved recently. Claire froze when she read it. It was her last name. She stumbled back. "No way, that's impossible. None of my family went here." Liam leaned in, his flashlight trembling slightly in his hand. The letters were deep, the edges sharp. Not faded, not old. Before any of them could speak, the air shifted. The temperature plummeted so fast their teeth began to chatter. Then, with a sudden pop, every light bulb lining the basement ceiling went out, plunging them into pitch black. The silence pressed in, heavy and suffocating. Then came the whispers. At first, faint, indistinct, like dozens of voices speaking all at once, just below hearing. But as the seconds passed, the whispers grew clearer. Childlike voices, layered on top of each other, circling the trio from all directions. Liam spun in place, phone light trembling as he tried to find the source. The beam swept across the desks, and he froze. The seats weren't empty anymore. Children sat in them. Pale, waxy-skinned children with hollow, black eyes. They stared straight ahead, unmoving, lips moving in unison with the whispers. Their mouths opened and closed mechanically, whispering the same phrase over and over. "Stay with us, stay with us, stay with us," Claire screamed. The sound echoed off the basement walls, but the whispering only grew louder, rising like a chant. Josh grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the stairs, but when Liam turned his flashlight to the wall, his stomach dropped. The stairs were gone. In their place was nothing but solid concrete, smooth and seamless, as if the exit had never existed. The three backed against each other, panic surging through them. The children in the desks all turned their heads in perfect unison, their empty eyes glinting in the weak flashlight beam. Then, without moving their lips, the voices filled the basement again. "You came down. Now you belong." The desk screeched as the children began to rise, their movements stiff, unnatural, bones cracking as they stood. The sound was unbearable, like wood tearing against stone. Liam dropped his phone in terror. The light spun across the floor before winking out, leaving them in suffocating blackness. The last thing any of them remembered was the sound of the children's bare feet scraping against the concrete, moving closer and closer. When the janitor finally found them hours later, huddled in the corner of the basement, they were pale and trembling, eyes wide with horror. They claimed they had been trapped down there for days, surrounded by whispering voices that wouldn't let them leave. But when the janitor checked his watch, only an hour had passed since they disappeared. The door to the basement was welded shut the very next day.